We meet again. This is the Product Uncensored show with your host, Colin Pell. Just in case you happen to click on this video or this podcast and you have no idea what you're looking at, right? And for those of you who are watching the video, you're probably wondering why I've got a special looking background. Aside from the fact that it's special, just like all our episodes, it's also in anticipation of the coming Lunar New Year. We also call it the Chinese New Year here in Malaysia, and we're ushering in the year of the ox. So if you have friends who celebrate the new Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year, go ahead and wish them 恭喜发财 or 恭喜发财. Yeah, it's going to be happening really soon. Now, before we jump into the discussion today, there are a few important things that I need you to know. Of course, number one is that I write at www.productuncensored.com. Number two is that all our videos are available on YouTube. And if you are going there to check it out, I recommend and I strongly, encourage you to click on the subscribe button as well, so that you will be notified when we have new content. Thirdly, if you don't like to see my face, all our content is also available on all major podcasting platforms. I think it should be showing up here sometime. And lastly, if you like this show and you want to support this show, there is a link in the description where you can go and support the show for the price of a coffee. It's going to be somewhere here. Okay, that's all the boring stuff that I want to do, and we're going to get stuck in today's episode. So we've got a special guest as usual, and today's guest, very well known. In fact, if you go to YouTube and you search what is a product manager, his video is actually the first result. If you search what does a product manager do, his video is also the first result. He's a thought leader who has spoken at numerous conferences, including Mind the Product Singapore. He gave a superb talk about popular misconceptions of the product craft. I highly recommend it. I'll link it somewhere. And he's the distinguished product manager at Atlassian, Sherif Mansour. Welcome to the show, Sherif.
Hey, Colin, and hi everyone watching. Thanks for having me. I think I have my mom to thank from liking all my YouTube videos now. It sounds like that's really paid off.
yeah. But that video that you did from Atlassian, it's always number one. Every time I search for something related to product management, it's always there. Top 3, top 5. So yeah, you're famous. You're famous now.
There you go. It's funny that video was written on it was done on a bit of a shoestring, very, very last minute. Someone in our agile practices team felt that there was a need for this content. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll write something. On the plane on the way from Sydney to San Francisco, I wrote the script in a little note-taking tool. Landed off the plane, had a shower in the office, and we just went recording with his camera, and that was it.
Wow.
I find the comments on that video pretty hilarious. So if your viewers are watching, you can. It's pretty entertaining. The YouTube comments are always entertaining, even more entertaining on your own videos.
That's true. So thank you so much for coming on the show, agreeing to be a guest. Just FYI, you are the first Australian-based product leader we've got on the show. Unfortunately, you're not the first Australian, though, because that accolade was taken by Ken Chin. So Ken Chin was our guest on episode 2. But you are the first Australian-based guest that we have. So, I've got lots of questions for you, but let's start with why don't you tell us your story about how did you end up becoming a product manager?
Yeah, accidentally mostly. So my theory is I'm yet to meet someone that's disproven me, but my theory is if you're 30s, 40s, or 50s, you probably fell into product management, or 60s. And if you're younger than that, you probably took a more deliberate path. So my story is pretty simple. Studied computer science at university, love computers. I think I always wanted to be a great coder, but truth is I was never a great engineer. But I was one of those people that would write code and be like, don't touch it, it works, just leave it.
Okay. I totally empathize because I agree with you. Yeah.
Totally. And meanwhile, we're like the serious people are like, nah, what if we could improve it this? I'm like, don't improve it. No, it works. Just leave it.
Sorry. I just have to butt in and tell you this story, right? So one of the things that one of my lecturers in university used to do was he would change bits of the code when you do a presentation, and then he'll ask you what happens. And I used to be terrified of that. And thankfully, in the end, I never went through it. But yeah, I heard that he would do that sometimes, and I was so scared of that because like I would like, okay, somehow it works. Don't touch it.
So he would do that while you're presenting back to the class, or doing. Oh wow, no, exactly. that would be my no. That would imply that I knew the design and knew exactly how it worked. That was never the case. But anyway, I love tech. I love writing code. I love trying to build software, I should say. Studied computer science. I actually recall my university lecturer in University of Wollongong. He said to the class, he's like, put your hand up if you're doing like a business information systems degree, and half the lecturers put their hand up, half the students. And he said, put your hand up if you're studying computer science, and the other half. And he said, statistics say that by the time you all finish your degree and get your jobs, sometime in your career you'll both swap, and most of you computer science folks will be on the business side, and some of you who think you're not going to be computer engineers end up becoming computer engineers. And I was like, that'll never be me. I'm a serious engineer, and it totally happened. Anyway, so I studied computer science, left, and worked as an engineer with a friend who ran a web development business back then, before everyone had a CMS, and a CMS was a category of software. It was a bit unheard of, probably showing my age here. So we rolled our own software and built websites for people before you could do that yourself. And then I worked at a large Australian telco, writing code and building software there. And then I started to get involved more on the business side of things, internal requirements. And we never had designers, so I was doing the design myself, doing that as well. So it's a bit of a generalist role. At the same time, so the story, this is a true story. So I used to have a personal blog where I'd blog a lot about my interests.
Was it on Blogspot?
No, it was just when WordPress came out. So it was WordPress 2 or WordPress. Well, I'm probably pushing my memory here. It was when you had to upgrade it every second day because WordPress kept getting hacked. But I was blogging about stuff. One of the things I blogged about was this Australian company called Atlassian that we had just used, some of the products in the company I was at. And what was fascinating to me was the business model that they were taking. And I'd written a blog about their business model. Effectively, Atlassian, I think, doesn't get enough credit for pioneering low-cost, high-volume software bought on a credit card online. Back then, I forget, it was about 20 years ago, maybe just under. That was unheard of. Like, no one bought business software on the internet with a credit card. No one did that. So that they were the first. So that felt very unique, and I've written some pieces about that. And then I had the VP of product at the time at Atlassian reach out to me and say, "Hey, do you want to come work for us as a product manager?" And I literally replied, I still have the email. It said, "I would love to work for you guys. Like, we use your software. I think you have a very unique model here. What's a product manager?" and I had, because I had taken product manager and I typed that into our job sites in Australia here, which is like Seek, and Seek is in Asia as well, and a few others. And there was 0 results, like literally 0 results. And so I was like, what is this thing? And, I didn't do too much research. I was just like, all right, what is this thing, product manager? Said, come in, we'll have a chat. And came and had a chat. And one thing led to another. And I ended up working at Atlassian. So literally fell into it. After falling into it, I was like, wow, maybe this is more of my passions and more natural gifting ability, more of what I wanted to do than trying to be an engineer. Wasn't really one. So that's how I fell into it. And then I've been doing it ever since. So 11 years at Atlassian now. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're definitely going to go into that as well. Like, you stayed in Atlassian for a really, really long time. But one of the things I was very curious, and by the way, sorry, just to validate your assumption or your hunch. Yeah, everyone I've had on this show so far, I think, I can't remember. Don't quote me on this, but I don't think anyone intentionally went into product management. Everyone, including myself.
So basically, you're telling me you've only had old people on the show. No, just joking. But you speak to some of the younger graduates and they're like, hey, I finished uni, or there's a path in uni where I can do some product management or some courses, so they can come into it much earlier than we did. But yeah,
it's true. I think also because like the people I tend to get on the show tend to be a bit more senior in their craft or in their role. So I think by definition, they would be in the higher bracket of age. So
I'm not offended, man. I'm just gonna take my walking stick and walk out of this room now.
Yeah, and then we can sit down with our tea and play cards afterwards. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So let's come back to you going to Atlassian, and that was when you took on that product manager role, right? What was it that made you, like, do you remember what was specifically it, that clicked that, hey, product management is it? Like, was it when you got the reply, or was it during the interview, or was it after you started? Like, what was it that made you decide that, yep, I think I found it? Because more than 10 years as a product manager is long. I mean, some people have been doing it longer, but to me, 10 years is pretty long.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that back then her name's Audra Eng was the VP of product. She runs product at Sonder now, I think. But she described the role to me, and I remember thinking, oh, I like doing those things. It was one of those. Don't forget that back then Atlassian was very small, so I think worldwide we were 150 people. So Sydney office must have been like 50 people or something, or 80 people. And so, the way she described it was fairly generalist back then, like, hey, you'll need to do this and do this and do that. And, a mix of working with engineers. And so I guess the one thing I felt like I was going to give up was coding, because PMs don't really code. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I was never good at that anyway. So maybe I'll do more of that. And I had got a taste of that in my first job, when we were sort of building websites for people, in terms of they weren't brochureware websites, but some of them were web applications for people. And so a lot of it was just meeting with people, trying to understand what their problems were, and then trying to build it. I was an engineer trying to do both, design it, build it, and get the requirements, and then you sort of learn over time. That was maybe my forte. I think. So I think when she described it, I'm like, okay, I did have a lot of anxiety about leaving engineering, because it's just hard to go back, just to build the patience for it. A product manager, you're switching context all the time. Engineer, if you're switching context, you're probably not productive, because you're trying to solve a very narrow problem. Yeah. So I was very conscious of losing that. But I think after doing it for a year, it was, and then it just felt like, oh, wow, I'm really enjoying this.
Yeah. That's true. Because I remember that when I had my first product management role as well, and I've told this story a few times. Even my father-in-law was worried, so he was like telling my wife, hey, you might want to ask him to like just be a bit more deliberate with the decision, because it was something very new in Malaysia at that time. So yeah, I can definitely understand like how you would have felt. Like you're heading off into this. It's like the Wild West of this industry, and you don't know what happens if it fails. Like, what if I don't cut it? What do I do? Do I go back? Do I keep forging on?
And it's not a I'm not like being ageist or anything here, but like when I tell my mom I'm a product manager today, she's like, Sherif works in IT. He works with computers. Like, I still am the person that turns her computer off or on. Like that's like, for her, that's the scope of like, you're a technology person. I'm just gonna bucket you in that scope. I don't know what a product manager is. Like, she had a hardware problem the other day. I don't know anything about computer hardware. I haven't done anything since high school. Exactly. And she was like, why don't you open it up and swap the RAM out? I'm like, I'd have to Google. I've got no idea. I'm like, she's like, but you work in IT. Don't you do this every day? I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't know where to start.
I think your parents and my parents, they're probably in the same, they're on the same frequency. I think, I can't remember who said what. My mom would always say, yeah, my son does, IT stuff. And then, if anyone asks you, like, you go ask him yourself. And then my dad would be like, yeah, he deals with computers, some tech stuff. So that's about as specific as they go. So
totally.
All right. So coming back to, product management, one of the things that sets you apart from every other guest on my show so far is that you are the first person with the title Distinguished Product Manager. I mean, the title is one thing, but the other thing is also that you are a single contributor product leader. And that to me has always been very interesting. So since since the time that I saw your talk at MTP, and you were talking about the different paths that you can take, I've always been very interested about that. So that's one of the main things I really wanted to jump into with you. And so I guess the first question is, how did it come about in Atlassian? Like, were you part of that like pioneer group, or was it already there when you joined?
Yeah, definitely. Since we caught up last call, and I am managing a couple of people now, but I've still large. I think I would still consider myself largely an individual contributor, but I think I have swung between those two roles quite a bit. But how did we come up? Sorry, the question was, how did we create that role, or why did we create that role? Or
well, both the how and the why.
Yeah. So, what we didn't have for Atlassian for many years didn't have job titles, and I assume many of your viewers who work in smaller startups, like they're just a product manager and who cares? Like they're just working on their thing. You grow, you add more and more people. People want to know what their career path is after a while. Easier said than done. I always encourage PMs to find a problem area they're passionate about than worrying about the next step. And if they just focus on that, the next step comes naturally, especially in larger organizations. But it's very easy to say that with a title like mine, and if you're an associate or something, you're like, yeah, whatever, like no one's going to listen to you to say that. We came about it purely from mistakes. So at Atlassian we were growing very fast, and we still are growing crazily fast, but we promoted is not even the right word. We put people in management positions for the wrong reasons. And so, we had teams growing, we added more people, we needed someone to manage those teams, product managers. And so it became the stage where people hit a step in their career where they were being told, hey, would you like to manage or would you not like to manage? And mentally, or maybe the mindset we had is management is a step up, and I think we've learned that that's the wrong mindset. But we learned that the hard way. So what had happened is we had all these people, and we're saying, hey, if you would like an increase in your salary, or if you would like an increase in scope, or if you'd like to be involved in this kind of work, such as strategy or vision or acquisitions or something else, you need to be a manager. Like that's the implicit message we were sending. And so people took the role for a bunch of different motivations, all valid. Some of them were I just like some more salary to look after my family and my career. Some of them like, I want to be involved in that thing, and my understanding is I have to be a manager. So we were focused on, I guess it resulted in people being focused on a job title to do certain activities there. The result, as we learned through our mistakes, is people would stick at that job for a while, and then they would leave, they would resign. They would realize that's not really where their heart is. Their heart is not about building a team. Their heart is more around solving this particular problem, or the heart is not so much about training and equipping others, etc. So we learned that the hard way. We had several people, we lost several people, etc. And I was going through the cycle too. It was during the time then we spoke to other of our peers, some of the larger organizations out there, about how they deal with this challenge. And it was very apparent to us that we needed to have two clear tracks in our organization. This is very much a growing company problem. I think some of your viewers are maybe working in companies that are 100 plus people are maybe running into this, or etc. But we have an individual contributor track and a manager track now, and it is technically possible for a manager to manage someone that is getting paid more than them. That is totally fine. It's where they're because we want to encourage people to be where they can add the most value. We'd speaking to some customers, our peers, and we'd hear stories where we'd have, at a very large, famous tech company, there's someone there who worked on like the earliest of products, but is still in the executive team and not managing anyone. And when you'd ask them why that's the case, they would say, because we know the moment we make him or her a manager, they will resign. And this is where they add the most value to the company. And so the result is we tried to come up with an individual contributor path where individuals can contribute to those strategic initiatives and can get their pay rises, without necessarily having to manage people, which makes it a bit more challenging when we're forming teams with managers and individual contributors. But it's a solvable problem, and it's largely a roles and responsibilities conversation. But that's pretty much how we ended up with that path. So I kind of then went along that path. A lot of people think distinguished product manager is sometimes some organizations have like product evangelists or something that are more marketing based. I work on products most of my day. Most of my talks and whatever are just me trying to share our mistakes and our learnings with the community, because I benefited from other people doing that. I encourage all our product managers at Atlassian, from juniors all the way to seniors, to say, if you finish a project, you've learned something, you can share that story. That's your story. Like someone else is in that same position, they can learn from you. So I'm mostly inbound, and then I try to, an old mentor of mine said, take the work that you've done, reflect on it in a year, and then say, what have I learned, and package that up and find a way to communicate that. And you'll find it'll be beneficial for yourself because you reinforce your learnings, but also beneficial for the community. And so I do that as well. But yeah, sorry, long way of saying that's how we fell into the individual contributor and manager path.
No, I mean,
we're now
it's
200
definitely
odd product managers. So
wow.
There's a big need for this the bigger we get. When we're small, we've never needed this, but yeah.
For sure. Yeah, but I mean, don't worry about, because this is what we want to talk about. Like, again, it's something very rare, especially in this part of the world. Like single contributor product leader roles are really hard to come by. I can probably count on like maybe one hand, maybe two. About people who are in senior leadership positions who aren't people managers as well. And you're right, because the implication has always been that if you want to climb the sort of product ladder, the way to go through it is by starting to manage people. That's where you get your salary bump and things like that. And like you say, right, some people, they just get promoted to fail, right? Because you get to that point where you're good at what you do, you're the subject matter expert, and then suddenly they put you in a realm where you're managing people, which is not your forte, and then you're forced to do it, and then everything just goes downhill from there. So yeah, definitely.
I'd encourage your just quickly on that, if your viewers are interested, like ever since I've been talking about this publicly, a lot of people are like, oh, thank you, I now have a reference point, which this is why you don't realize that everyone's got a story to tell. And if you point to another company that's doing it, we can all get better as a community. So now I got a reference point. My reference point was a bunch of other companies, but Hunter Walk from YouTube, who used to work at Google, he went through the same stories. If you Google Hunter Walk YouTube, he has a blog about his journey around managing in Google and YouTube, and how if you didn't feel like you had to go down that path, you probably would have stayed longer. So we're not the first, but we're all learning from each other.
For sure. Thanks for that. So the question also is, like, when you joined Atlassian and when you became a product manager, did you always was it already clear in your mind that you didn't want to go down the people manager route, that you want to be a single contributor, or is that something that has always been like an evolving is it like a set target, moving target,
Yeah, it's moved for me. So I think initially, if you asked me in my first few years, I would have said, I think I would like to manage. I think mainly with the assumption is, for the wrong reasons, I would have said back then. I would have liked to manage for the wrong reasons, because I thought that that's how you progressed. I went to conferences, and I recall hearing from thought leaders saying, someone asked the question in a crowd in a big conference here in Australia, and they said, do you think you have to manage people to be a product leader? And the answer was yes. Like, I still remember that moment, and it was early on in my career. And so that, leadership and management is very intertwined in that definition. And so that's what I grew up, that's what I thought was the right thing. So I was like, okay, I guess if I want to be a leader, I have to start managing. People can lead in many positions. And then, so I think early on that was the motivation. Later on, I did end up managing a team for different sets of motivation. I just felt it was the best way I could have the largest impact. And then moved away from that again, went to individual contributor for quite a few years. And only recently, now just managing two people, much smaller team, and still doing quite a bit of individual contribution. But it's much more deliberate now. I'm like, all right, I need to think about how I'm going to help these people grow. But also I've got this one or two little, epic like projects that I need to work on to deliver as well. So we're very fortunate, Atlassian, like a lot of people swing between management and individual contributor in all our disciplines. And we have a strong blogging culture internally. Like everything's a blog. So people blog about their announcements, their babies, their achievements, their failures, their successes. So a lot of people blog about, I'm switching back to individual contributor, I'm switching back to management. So I think that transparency helps give people a sense of safety that they can try it and they can go back and forth, and it's you're not that's not going to hurt you. So we have engineering managers that are going, I'm going back to coding because I really need to build that empathy again. And then I'm going to come back to management after 5 years. And you're like, wow, you've been doing management for 10 years and you're going to do this. Good on you. Like,
wow.
So yeah, that happens there.
Well, that's crazy, amazing. You know, it just blows my mind that, you know, because I think you mentioned it, right? The safety is what really is so important. Like in a company culture, and I think more so in product. And of course, I'm biased because I'm a product guy, right? But I think that safety being in that product manager role, because like there's so many things that seem to be on our shoulders sometimes. You feel like if you change or you do something differently, then what about, and what if? So I think that safety, and like you say, right, the more people are open about it, the more it sounds less awkward or less weird. Like, you know, it's not like this road less travel or something. So that's really interesting. So then the next question that comes out of this is, what will be the biggest differences, or, you know, is there only the difference of, you know, if you're a people manager, you manage people, that's it. And then if you're a single contributor, that's it. Like in your experience, because you'll be the perfect candidate, right? You've done both. What will be the biggest differences that you see between a single contributor product leader versus a people manager product leader?
I think the main difference has to be in when you look at what is their primary objective for that role. So it's hard. This is very hard to say, but like when you're a manager, you can be your performance assessment can happen, if you like, by two things. Oh, let's say I'm a manager of a team of 4 product managers working on a product. I can judge that manager by the product's performance. So I can say, all right, this is the product's outcomes. You've met these KPIs with like these objectives that you set on churn and revenue and whatever it is. Or I can look at that manager and say, hey, your primary assessment is actually going to be on the growth and the velocity of learning for your team. So that's sort of what you want to say. Whereas the individual contributor, you want to say your growth is on the customer outcome. Now, the manager, if they're doing an amazing job, they're getting that customer outcome indirectly by focusing on the growth of the team because they're getting economies of scale here, right? So, but it really comes down to that cultural shift where the big difference is you need to be looking at managers and judging them on their team is their product. They're building a team. So how are their team members growing? Are they learning? Are they sharing? Are they, you know, are they're all doing well? Are they performing as well, directly and indirectly? You know, great managers think of their product as a team. And you think, okay, what are the problems in my team right now? What are the problems I need to solve? What does the team look like successful in 2 years' time? Like it's the same thing as a product, right? Like you think of the people as a team. And so you then start building your personal roadmap for building this team that way. I'm going through this mentally right now with my team. I'm like, okay, I have 2. We're probably going to add a few more now. I need to rethink of my mindset to move a little bit further away from like the customer outcome directly and indirectly achieve that by enabling a bunch of people to do that. And you go through these, I feel like you just go through these cycles up and down and do it several times. Whereas individual contributor, I think you really want to focus on that outcome, customer outcome. There are specific responsibilities that, you know, will swing. So for example, we have some individual contributors in large products that are responsible for the product vision. So they're spanning 3 or 4 teams. And the manager is not. The manager is working with the individual contributor to enable them to do that. We have some scenarios where the manager is doing the vision as well. I mean, they'll pull in their team, but the manager is the driver in that scenario. And I think it's I guess the belief here is that we cannot assume, if we believe that every team is different and you always want to play to your team's strengths, then who gets what responsibility card needs to be allocated dynamically and not copybook, if you like. There's a gentleman from Riot Games called Ahmed Sidki. He spoke about this a while ago at Riot Games, and they do this thing when they form a team. They have this, like, if you like, a play where they have a set of responsibilities, and by default, it's not like, okay, this responsibility would go to the designer every time. They're like, actually, we have a junior designer in this scenario. We might give this one to the PM. And then the next time they form a same team, that responsibility might go to a designer, if you like. And so they dynamically adjust who's responsible for what, depending on the team seniority levels and what their, career ambitions are and where they are. So long way of saying one size fits all is super hard to apply, right?
Yeah.
But I think the general principle of performance of your team versus customer outcome is the main difference for manager and individual contributor in my mind.
Okay, yeah. But I think from how you've mentioned it, it is going to be like you said, dynamic, right? So it's not so clear cut, but that would also mean that from a senior leader's position, right, they have to be very comfortable with allowing that space for that to happen, right? Because you're probably always in a state of change, in a state of transition. And because so if you don't have the right leaders in place, they're gonna freak out, right? Because what do you mean it's not the designer doing it? What do you mean? I've suddenly switched from individual to now team people manager, and then I'm going back. So it just sounds
another example, Colin. Like, who plays captain in most projects in large organizations? From what I talk to a lot of our customers are product managers. They'll say the PM's the captain, like they own this final decision. In some more forward-thinking organizations, say the captain role differs depending on which primary team member, whether it's the engineering leader, the PM leader, or the design leader. Sometimes the design plays captain on some projects. Sometimes what if you have a junior PM on a project? Are they always captain, and you have an engineering leader that's been there for 3-4 years longer? I don't know. Like, I guess. We live in an uncertain time, and projects are never predictable. We all know that. Yeah. And it's funny, we still look for the human instincts to always look for a predictable thing, because that's just safe, right? It just feels safer, but it's
stable
reality.
Yeah, correct. It reminds me of this question that I had for one of my job interviews before, and the interviewer was saying, hey, in this company, the direction, the people who are closest to the customer are actually the designers. Now, what do you think about that as, the potential product leads? I was like, but what does that, I don't think that's a big problem at all, right? Because at the end of the day, if I can't work with the designer, it doesn't matter who's the subject matter expert or who's closer, it's still gonna suck. So, I mean, of course, I didn't say in those literal words, but that's how I would think about it, right? It, like you say, in some cases, if the outcome that you're trying to achieve is going to be very heavily driven by that user experience, it would make sense that somebody who's on the UX side would take the calls, and your role is to support that as much as possible. And very interesting.
Irony is the best PM answer for most questions is it depends, but we don't apply that for our own org charts. Something that was a bit frustrating to see. There was a thought leader once that posted a tweet saying, what is the ideal ratio between engineering and PM? And all these people were applying with their perfect ratios. Oh, it's 1-10. Oh, it's 1-18, 1-8, 2 pizza team rule, blah, blah. Like, as if it's like this binary, outcome. The answer has to be, it depends. If you're working on a team with, I don't know, with doing some back-end heavy performance engineering, you probably could have all engineers running that and 30 engineers to 1 PM. So it's just this constant reminder that we can't be looking for these. The answer is it depends. And like you said, the project you're in, maybe it's UX heavy. So in that case, that works really well. Maybe it's a set of APIs. Maybe you need a PM that's more computer sciencey oriented, right?
Exactly.
So it's different.
Yeah. Okay. I've got one last question just around, the role of, single contributor versus, or in comparison with, a people manager. One of the things that if I ask myself, honestly, even I struggle with this. In your own journey in product, did you feel like sometimes because you were, at the points where you didn't manage anyone, you felt you were slightly inadequate because everybody else who's a leader has someone, it's like having a family versus not having a family almost.
Yes. No. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And how did you? Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. How did you?
No. It's a different question. So please.
Oh no, absolutely. Like we felt that, and this is where the mistakes started happening for us as we were growing. We felt that, okay, so I have to manage now. I think the what didn't help in our scenario is, I mentioned earlier, we have a big active blogging culture. So someone would move from individual contributor management, and we used to phrase that as, awesome, this person is stepping up into this role. Not like this person's taking on a new challenge of finding out how to build a team. It was seen as even the phrase "step up" is a terrible phrase to use for that scenario, right? No, I struggled with this because yeah, like I thought that was the only way. And so I mentioned early on in my career, that's what I felt like I had to do next, and that's what I wanted to do, but the wrong motivations. In that scenario. Yeah.
So would you say that right now you're probably like, you could say with absolute confidence, I'm comfortable in my own skin, assuming if you were still in that individual contributor role?
Yeah, I think as you I don't know, as you do more in product management, your motivations change, right? So right now, my motivation in my particular time of my career is to solve a particular problem, and I'm doing everything I can to solve that problem. Initially, it meant that I wasn't managing people, and now I'm like, actually, I think the best way I can solve this problem is to build a team to help me solve this. So now I'm now doing that. Like we're sort of like doing that right now, working on a new product on this particular problem area. So that's what we're doing right now.
Okay.
So my motivation's changed, right? So, but I think people's motivation will change as time passes. I think from an idealistic purist perspective, you always hope as a PM, people's motivations are always. I said this to someone the other day. There is a vast difference of behaviors that you observe with a PM that you hire who is really excited about solving a particular problem or trying to flesh this problem out a bit more, to a PM that wants a job in product management. Like the questions they ask, the activities they would like to take are very different. And I don't think that the other one's bad. I think it's just the motivation they have at the time, and it evolves to be over time when they feel a sense of psychological safety. You find their motivation might change to be like, I just want to work on this cool problem over here. Like I actually don't care what my title is or whatever. But you'll notice, we've been hiring. I've been doing probably it feels like multiple interviews a week for the last 11 years. It hasn't stopped. But you'll notice when like just a motivational change of when they land and join the team, how they behave differently from like, I really want to join you to work on this particular problem versus like, I want a career in product management, and it's a different mindset, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. I like that. Okay, so let's move on. Let's leave this little topic behind, lest the whole entire conversation becomes about that. I wanted to talk a little bit also about the things that you do that are related to the industry but not necessarily related to your work. What I mean by that is you being this external product thought leader and subject matter expert that people look out to. You've done videos, you've spoken at conferences. How did you start doing that? Was this something, again, was it accidental? Was it by design?
Yeah, it was mentioned this, touched on it very briefly earlier, but an old mentor of mine, it's probably might send him this video. Listen, Nicholas Muldoon, actually, he was encouraging me to. He's like, everything you've learned, every project you've learned something, and you don't stop and reflect back and go, what did I actually learn, and codify that in some way, because all you're doing as a product manager over your experience is building your toolbox.
Yeah.
Of frameworks, techniques, processes, approaches, mental models, whatever it is. And then you want to find a way to codify that. And if you do that, you give back to the community. Product management is still very early in its infancy, right? Like, that holistically as a whole, we become a better community. So my personal motivation was to become a better communicator. That's one of my growth areas that I've always wanted to focus on. And he was like, well, look, you've learned something every project. Why don't you go ahead and do this? And so I started writing a blog for a particular thing I worked on, or a talk on a particular thing I worked on. A lot of feedback I got, which was encouraging from the community. So it's nice that people actually give you feedback, and they're like, it's nice to hear from a practitioner who is, I'm not really, I'm gonna walk into like a trouble here. I'm not like dissing consultants, but like it's nice to hear from someone who's actually doing a day job and who's just like lifting and shit. Because a lot of my presentations are screenshots from our internal presentations. Like it's actual, here's our raw materials, which we're happy to share. So it's, they just feel a sense of, oh, it's not just me going through these problems. Hey, look, Atlassian's struggling with this just as much as I am, and they seem like bigger. So I feel much better about this thing now. So the motivation was mostly selfishly to be a better communicator, but over time, I'm like, I just see it as part of moving product managers around the world forward a bit better. I still have moments in my mind that I flash back to that early conference I told you about, where I heard someone say to be a leader, you have to be a manager. And I was like, I need to be part of the solution and help share my opinion or a different viewpoint to help spark that conversation. So lots of motivational factors there.
Nice. And so what would you, or, do you have any tips or tricks, for anyone who's watching or listening and they're like, hey, I want to be like Sherif, I want to be able to get up onto a stage, and be comfortable, in my own skin. What would you tell them? Like, how should you start going about doing it?
Yeah, if it's the motivations to be a public speaker, I think my strategy has been pretty simple. Tell your story so no one can mess with your story. If it's genuine, it's literally your experience. You could think like, oh, it's a junior learning. Someone said to me the other day, I did this the other day, but then I felt like I couldn't create a talk about it because I'm like, surely someone else has talked about this. I'm like, it's your story. No one's going to critique you for your experiences. If you start to come out and say, here's a framework I developed, and there was a substance behind it, like I'm sure people will critique you, but you're saying this is what I did with my team and this is the outcome, and you can try it yourself, and this didn't work and this worked. So I think make it your story, make it genuine, because you've all worked on something. That means you have something to share. And if you feel like you have nothing to share, find another role or find another opportunity to learn. But you should be learning every project you complete, right? I have an associate in my team, Rachel. She's amazing. I've been trying to pass down what someone told me to her, and she's created her first set of talks on the things that she's learning. Interesting topic. What does it mean to be an introverted product manager? And she's sharing her viewpoint with an extroverted manager, me, loud voice, old man, grumpy old man. She's an introvert. She's like, so how does she deal with me, and how does she deal with an engineering team when she's the one that in a room, she's the one that would prefer to think about it and then come back to the group, right? It's a different communication style. How does she deal with that? It's her story. And it's exciting to see her do that as well. So make it your story, and then just write or go apply to speak. Don't be embarrassed to do so. And, you'll just continue to get better at it. And the other tip someone told me is, if you give the same talk a few times, which sounds really boring and cheating, they described it like a wine, which is a bit weird. Like it just ages better over time. It is true, because you get more comfortable with the narrative, and you can ad lib a bit more when you're sharing that particular topic. So I've spoken a lot about individual contributors and managers, probably several conferences and several blogs. And so I just feel more comfortable with that topic because I'm just sharing what I've learned in those areas. So in any large organization, especially big, medium to large, I should say, being an excellent verbal or written communicator is an essential part of the role. I would argue the bigger the organization you join, the less frameworks and skills you might actually need, but the more communication you need. Like if I observe my journey, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, it is influencing without authority, but you're doing it at a different scale. The best way to achieve the customer outcome is to influence a department or a team to go and do a particular thing. And so you'll have more access to specialists in a larger organization. And so you may not need as many generalists. And so you might want to flex more the communication muscle. So we just see it as a big part of any growing organization.
Okay. Very nice. Thanks for that. So then I want to go into, just your point of view about product management, because you've been in product management 11 years now. You've probably seen it all. I'm very curious to know, like, what are the trends in product management that you're seeing, that holds, what does the future hold for product management?
Well, the future.
Yeah,
Oh, wow, that's a good one.
it could be trends that you've noticed in the last, the X number of years, but then also be interested to hear from you, like, where do you think product management is heading to in the future?
Yeah, I think a huge trend to call out is this mindset shift between, product managers doing all the work to product managers enabling their team to do all the work. And I've been vocal about this. I've seen it with my customers. A lot of our customers are PMs, and it's funny. It's a bit meta. I get to interview PMs about how they do PM, and then think about etc. So, but I think it's. I certainly came from this too. Like, I felt I was a spec warrior ninja. Like, I could write the best specs, and I would give them to engineers and whatever. And I knew the customer better than anyone else. And that's what I was told to do, right? So I would do the research, I would do all that stuff, I'd get into the data, and I would know the data really well. And I think for maybe a very small startup of 5-10 people, you still need people that do that. But I think any organization that's 20-30 people, I think a trend that's happening is PMs play more of a facilitation role. And I really don't mean a project management role.
Yeah.
To be very clear here, I found the more forward-thinking organizations that seem to be executing great on customer outcomes empower their engineering leaders to take the project management function. And the way they do that is through context providing or context building together as a team. And I'm not sharing anything new here, but I really feel like it's happening at a much faster wave than it ever was before. Someone says to me, "Can you share how you write a spec?" And I was like, "Well, the truth is, we try to avoid writing specs." And you're like, "Wait, what?" And then some people, it takes a while for people to go, "Well, why is that?" And you're like, "Well, what is this?" To put your PM hat on, what is the problem a spec solves, right? It's a bit meta here, but a spec is an artifact to try to build a shared understanding on a set of problems, right? We write our specs terribly. That's another story. We write our specs as a bunch of solutions, and then which is the old way of the classic user story. As a user, when you write user, we don't even talk about the kind of user. The user is we just say user. And you're like, what the hell does that mean? I want to, and then write your solution, and then tell the engineers to go build it. And then you're like, I'm all agile.
A fantastic user story, yeah.
yeah. But Jeff Patton will always tell me this. He always reminds me user stories got their name from how they should be used, not what format they should be written in.
Yeah.
Which is back in the Kent Back days, which is just it is to tell a story. And the best way to tell a story is to get your team to experience that story, right? Experience could be bring them along for the journey. Experience could be providing as much context as possible. If they can't be in that discovery journey together, then you're also trying to do that. It's not necessarily you doing all the work and then saying, trust me, team, I've done the research. This is what we're building next. So I think that's a huge trend. If you felt the same there, would you think the same or similar or?
Yeah. I think I really resonate with that because, I see it as, where in the past, there was almost this expectation where, the PM, the product manager has to drive it, has to, so anything you don't know, ask the PM, you don't agree with it, ask the PM. And I've definitely seen this change, especially in the thought leaders, in the way that they write, in the in the videos that they create, where it's always about how are we going to achieve this together. And if that means that, hey, you've got to take some of this and you've got to take some of that, that's okay. And just because the product manager doesn't know everything, it doesn't mean the product manager is bad, useless, or inferior. It just means that you've got a great team, and that's great. So yeah, I definitely think that is a trend that I've been seeing as well.
And the other thing I've observed is that you go through these cycles. So as in, you may join a new team or a new product or a new problem area, and then you're the one that you're finding yourself doing all the work. But what I tell PMs is that's fine, because that might be the best thing you can do to help your team get started. But your mindset is not because you're more important. How do I get out of this job as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
And you might never get there, but the moment you can say, I've done that, it's the moment you have built a shared brain with your team. Because, I spoke about this in my talk a while ago, but like, hello everyone from the company that makes Jira. I apologize. I'll take you give me some feedback later. But like, it really does pain me, Colin. Like, I interview a lot of PMs who spend hours on a Jira backlog, dragging one card over another card. That to me is a signal that, because they have some context to say this thing is more important than that thing, why can't any engineer have that context, right? Like, a really good sign that the engineers got that shared brain is if they know that you've agreed on what the goals are and they know how to get there. If it needs you to drag 3 cards up and 2 cards down and do some backlog grooming, you may have to do that initially, but you've got to get out of there as quick as you can. And the way you get out of there is building that shared brain. Like, and so I personally find myself going through these loops, like new project, new team, new environment, get hands dirty again. All right, what's going on? All right, how do I get everyone across this together? And then you sort of peel your way back up, and then you sort of do again. I think that's one huge trend.
What about the future? Let's talk about the future. Where do you think product management is going? If I'll give you the very typical. Where do you see product management in 10 years?
Yeah, it's hard. There's a bit of conversation going on, well, at least in the circles that I've read, around like product management specializations. So you like in the next 10 years. So you think of design as a discipline, right? We have visual designers, we have interaction designers, we have user experience designers, we have motion designers. Like, think of the subtitles, if you like. And in PM we have PM. Who's that person? Other PM. They're like you're like, okay, what kind of PM? And there's lots of different frameworks for PMs out there. So one school of thought is pushing around, hey, we need PM subtitles, if you like PM specializations as the future. And that's a further sign of maturity. So for example, we may have a mobile PM, or we may, and that person's known as a mobile PM, and that's all they do, mobile. Or we may have a technical PM in this particular stream of work, or we may have a PM that's more user experience oriented. I'd like some of that thinking, because it alludes to where people's natural abilities might lie best, or where their interests lie best. I dislike it because a PM's job by definition is really to fall in love in a problem and help flesh that problem out for the team. And I would argue to some extent that they should not really be solution designers. The moment you start to say a PM is this kind of PM, you're now saying that I have someone that specializes in this solution. Like, I have a mobile PM, and now you're like, you've already made a lot of assumptions there on the problem, right? So we're starting to build teams not around the customer, but around our sort of specializations, which scares me a bit, Colin. So I know I think that's one of the things that's being discussed in the community. My thought is that while we may have those discussions within a team, so for example, oh, what kind of PM is this person? Oh, they're this kind of PM. Let's put them on that project. I don't think we should go as far as making them formal titles, because I feel like that's a solution approach to building a team, rather than more of a, I need someone to flesh out a problem. I don't care if the problem's in mobile or where. It's a people problem. Like, this person has this problem, they choose to solve it on their mobile device or on a desktop or on a tablet. Who cares? Like, those technology boundaries are artificial, right? So anyway, so I think that's a future push that I'm not sure where I think I sit more on the, don't do anything there. I don't know, man. Other than that, like, I think, like, you talk about future, like, what is a PM's role with regards to AI and ML and ethics in product management, right? Like, I spoke to someone who was interviewing with us, who works for a gaming company, and he indicated to me that, like, the main reason he wanted to get out of it was be careful with my I don't know, disclosing anyone here. Like, the main reason I want to get out of it is his reward was purely on people's addictions. So being transparent here, like, he's saying the way I was rewarded and encouraged to build the product was to get people addicted. The more I did that, the better it was. And so you're like, wow, what is a PM? Like, where's the ethics? Like, how do you come up with a framework for that? Like, think about PMs in gambling organizations, right? Like there's lots. I'm sure there's lots of gambling apps or whatever, and poker online, whatever.
Mhm.
He said like, another one I spoke to came from an online poker one. Actually, she was a great story. She was telling me about how they had a wallboard in their team on the, how like most teams are like, what's our total monthly active users or revenue?
Mhm.
Their wallboard was average loss per customer,
Ooh,
dollar loss.
ouch.
Because
Okay.
yeah,
That's how you make money.
like, yeah, that's how the business runs, right? And you're like, when you flip and you're talking about gambling, you're like, wait, so how do you draw the line here with like so I think, sorry, that touches two topics, both I didn't really touch AI there. I'd more touched ethics and product management. I think especially with our addicted world, this is like an addiction, right? This is insane. Like as someone who has kids, you now realize how highly this is a drug, right? Like
yes.
But we are rewarded, if I'm in a social media company, I'm rewarded for active users. I'm rewarded for, engagements. Like, that's how, we think about it. So I think PM has a lot to answer there in the future. I don't have answers. I just think we just need to talk about it more. Yeah.
No, I
think
agree.
AI is a dovetail in that as well. Like AI is a subsection of that, because AI raises a whole bunch of ethics issues, and then so that relates to that.
Yeah. I think you've brought up really, really good points, and I would love to be like pick your brain a bit more. But yeah, I think I do see a lot of what you're saying as to where we're going, even on the point of like specialization. And I think you're right. Yeah, even I don't know where I stand on that one. Like I'm a little bit iffy about the whole thing as well, because I feel like, and again, I guess my school of thought may not be for everyone, but I feel like product managers are supposed to be flexible, right? Because you have a problem, and I'll help you solve the problem. So it doesn't matter which space you're in. I mean, that's not to say that if you want.
I'll give you an example, Colin. We I was sharing a mistake we made. We had a PM in my team that was a mobile PM working on Confluence Mobile, one of our products, and we had a PM working on a particular part of Confluence on the web. This is years ago. The mobile team solved the problem just on mobile, and then when we were doing reviews and feedback sessions, I was like, well, yeah, but that same person needs to search for that same page online, and they were like, oh, that's the web team's problem. It's not my problem. And you're like, no, you're here to solve a problem. I don't care about. So then I realized we formed our team around technology solutions, not around the customer. Like that's our fault, right? Like we've said, we have a mobile team and a web team. That's like, so we flipped our team structure to be like, we have a team looking at Confluence for software teams, and we have a team looking at Confluence for non-technical team. So we sort of flip that mindset, and then it's harder for engineering because they have to span different boundaries. Yeah, but it's more of a customer-centric team structure in that regard.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I like that story, because it puts it in a real setting, right? Because sometimes it sounds so meta, sounds so up in the air. But okay, very nice, very nice. I always end up having to say this to a lot of guests on the show. We probably have to come back for like session 2 some other time, because right at the end we always get into the interesting stuff. But I'm gonna leave this for now. And by the way, I know I've got some viewers who gave me feedback. No, why don't you go in? It's like, yeah, because I'm not Joe Rogan. I can't do like 3-hour sessions, bro. So sorry, I had one last question for you, and that's longevity in product, right? So you've done, what is it, 11 years, I think, on record for product management in the same company. Now, I have honestly, hand on heart, I have not met anyone who has worked in the same company for 11 years, let alone being in product for 11 years in the same company. How do you do that? Like, what's the secret?
Just part of the old furniture here, man. I think there's 2 dimensions to that for me personally. The first part of that answer, the first dimension really is, I realized to solve the set of problems I wanted to solve when I joined Atlassian. I worked on Confluence for 6 years. I don't work on that product anymore, but like it was hard to make a footprint in a year. Like generally in the B2B space, in this particular context I was in, like I was passionate about solving a particular set of problems, and I'm like, I struggled to make an impact in a year. Like, to be honest with you, Colin, unless you're working on consumer products that are single player mode or whatever, it's hard to, like, some of the problems we want to solve are like, they're not trivial problems. You know, I heard the other day that the Figma team have been working for 4 years before they came out of beta.
Wow.
Like talk about MVP phase. Like they worked for 4 years before, and like that product is, you know, all our designers rave about it and all that stuff. They love it. But like, so anyway, so part of me is like, I you know, as someone who wanted to solve a particular set of problems and was trying to focus on the customer outcome, I didn't feel like I had an impact in a short period of time. It was very hard in our space, at least our context. And the second reason is we're quite, I guess, bringing a growing organization. Every year we've added a lot of people. And so there's a new opportunity for something else, a new set of projects, a new set of products, a new organizational challenge. And so it's honestly felt like you know, you don't get bored. Like it's a different scenario every now and then, with the, I guess, the psychological safety of being in one company and not having to do it. You're like, oh, why? So every year I ask myself 3 questions. Am I enjoying the people I work with in priority order? Am I enjoying the problems I'm working on? And am I learning? And like, I've just answered yes every year. I encourage all PMs to do that. I mean, just mentally ask yourself those 3 things. And if you feel like you're yes, then why change? Like, I am getting a bit paranoid going, are these people going to think like I'm an old fart and like I will be unemployable now? But, you know, I have spoken to plenty of PMs at Google, especially Google had the APM program. They're famous for pioneering Associate Product Manager program. A lot of APMs there have, you know, 10 years ago during the Marissa Meyer days, have just finished or going past that mark now. So there is quite a few people that are, there's way more people that are older than me, Colin, just so you know. I don't color my hair. This is au natural.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well,
this is my COVID hair too. It's like I haven't cut it since COVID. It's terrible.
I don't know. I'm very fortunate because if I take off my cap, it's just as bad. So I'm fortunate that way. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing about those 3 questions. I think that's part of the thing about being in product management. You know, I don't do this enough myself as well. Like we learn frameworks, we have toolkits to solve this problem, to achieve that, and everything else. And funnily enough, we don't use enough of that on ourselves. Like, you know, simple 3 questions, right? Your stand-up questions, like use it on yourself. Like, what were you working on? What are you going to be working on? Is there anything in your way, or how you put it, right? Do you like the people you work with, the problem that you're solving? Are you learning? So yeah, I think, I like that. It was really refreshing. And I think, you know, speaking about hair, sorry, that was a cheap shot, but yeah, it's a good way to move into the last segment of the show, which is, you know, a song that you chose. And I would really like you to tell us about this song, because I thought the way you framed it was brilliant.
All right, so when Colin asked me to pick a song, I was like, well, why am I picking a song? And then I watched an episode or 2 and I was like, I see what he does now. So the song I'm picking is I Shot the Sheriff. So my name's Sherif. You pronounce it Sherif. Some people pronounce it Sheriff. It honestly doesn't bother me. But throughout all of school and everything, you get a lot of friends that either like to call you Sheriff or just call you Sheriff. And so then the natural song that happens when you're at school and then follows you when you're older is I Shot the Sheriff. Good old Bob Marley.
Oh yeah.
And so that's a song. So I don't know why I chose a song to give me some high school nightmares, but the irony is but I did not shoot the deputy. I have a brother, his name's Sammy, and so you'd always get I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot Sammy. So you got that correct. Anyway, so and I think I've had that a few times walking on a stage for different conferences, a bit of fun. So that's why I've picked Bob Marley, I Shot the Sheriff.
Very nice. Yeah, because when you're saying, you know, and you talked about the second line, but I did not shoot the deputy. I was literally thinking to myself, it cannot be that your brother's name is Deputy. I actually went there for
that would be hilarious. That would be even more reason.
Yeah. So
I couldn't think of any other song of that. Yeah, I couldn't think of any other song when you asked me other than all the kids. You know how Spotify or all the music services give you the year in review.
Yeah.
All of mine is because we share the same account. It's all my kids' music. So I'm like, they're all kids' music. So
Oh
I'm just gonna
yeah,
go with that.
that's the one thing
Yeah.
I've resisted the temptation of doing, like creating this family account and then when all my kid songs are on it. So it's like, no, this is my premium account. Don't touch it. So so I get all
Yes,
my
it helps
music.
with the recommendations. I
Yes.
made the mistake of Netflix. We all operated on one account. Then I realized, I should create a kids account, or I don't want my kids watching other these. I did
Yeah.
that later, but then I kept the other account. So then I still get these like Captain Underpants recommendations and these things that I'm like, oh, I don't want to reset my account again. Some PM in Netflix, if you're watching this, please fix that up for me. Like just somehow, I don't know how. Just find a solution.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Sherif. The link to the video will be up here somewhere. I can never get it right where it ends up being. And yeah, so I guess the final question for you would be, what would you like to leave with our listeners and viewers from today? Like what would you say? Do you have any like special words for 2021 or for product management or something like that?
I genuinely, like we talked about the nuance and not being so binary in product management. Like I think the main thing I'd love to leave everyone is like everything's more nuanced than you think it is, and like and it's easy for someone to write the tweetable tweet that is like a very binary answer to a question. And I think in product management, you always find people are thinking in matrix, in a matrix or in a flow chart, and because there's so many situations, and be cautious reading all the thought leadership from myself and the rest of the community, and read it critically and in a more of a nuanced fashion, because it's rarely a one size fits all. So I think that would be my encouragement, so that the community gets better. Like be critical on, here's some framework. It's more nuanced than that. When was the scenario applied at? Why did it work, etc. Would it work in your context? Everyone's different. So
Yeah.
I don't know how to summarize that in a sentence other than saying
It
take nothing
depends.
on face value. Yeah, it depends. Like remember, it depends, right? Like everything's it depends.
Yeah.
No one size fits all.
Okay. So everyone, thank you so much. That was our guest for this episode. That was Sherif Mansour, and all the way from Sydney as well. So really appreciate him coming on the show. And once again, I think he's given us really lots of great nuggets of wisdom from his own experience, from his own learnings. And I think it's good stuff for us to really reflect upon as well. So until I see you guys in the next episode, please continue to be safe. We live in strange times, uncertain times. The only thing that is certain is uncertainty. We need to get comfortable with that. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.